This module is going to be on equipment, in particular TV screens, as it relates to the big picture. As we mentioned before, you can purchase your equipment anywhere. We have no markups on any of our equipment. Our desire was to have a very clean and simple relationship from that standpoint. However, we do need to maintain a measure of quality control. So if you're going to order your equipment from an outside vendor, we ask that you run it past us first, because there are some brands that we recommend that you stay away from. Just as an aside, our current vendor for TVs is typically 10 to 15% under even Walmart and Costco, but that doesn't mean that at some point you run into a closeout taking place that can beat even our pricing. So let's start with a simple portrait. This is typically a 39 or 40 inch screen, but it can actually be any size. We've used 50 and 55 inches turned portrait as well. This is a picture of a 40 inch screen that we took in our office. Please note this does not represent the quality of the advertisement, as there's reflections on this screen that's coming from within the office windows. But as you can see, this is a 39 or 40 inch TV that is turned from a typical landscape position to a portrait position, and our ad takes up the whole screen. This would be similar to a full-page ad in a high-quality magazine. Next up is our media wall. This is typically a 55-inch or 60-inch TV showing live TV. And again, it's going to have the TV in its normal landscape position. And then this will be bookended by two 39-inch or two 32-inch TVs on each side that would be showing our advertising. And as you see here, these TVs are turned portraits, so they bookend the 55-inch or 60-inch TV in the middle. So this is looking at it from another perspective. Again, you have your two 32-inch or two 39-inch TVs that are going to be bookending the 55 or 60-inch TV there in the middle showing live TV. The idea is that the viewers are going to be looking at the live TV, but the changes that are taking place on the screens on the left are also going to catch their attention. As you can see here on this slide, we actually have the bookend TVs that are changing, and you have to admit it does catch your attention as those changes take place. Next up is our landscape. Now this is typically a 55-inch or a 60-inch TV, but it can be any size. We've taken another picture of one of our screens in the office, and as you can see, our portrait advertisement is over on the right side, and then the content can be over on the left. We can divide this screen up into as many quadrants as the business owner might want. So for example, in the area where you're seeing the woman and child, we can actually put their own content, infomercial, whatever it is they might want there, or we have plenty of video content that we can put there as well. Our servers hold well over 6 hours of video, so that can be streaming and be quite varied for the viewer. We can show the weather or the stock market or whatever they might want in the other zones that we have lined out there. So let's talk about the TV mounting brackets that would actually hold the TVs up. There's basically 5 types. There's the fixed, which as you can imagine is stationary and there's no movement. Then you have the tilt, the full motion, the tilt with full motion, as well as the ceiling. These mounts are no different than you would use in your own home, and they can be purchased anywhere. To give you an idea what they look like, this is a picture of a typical fixed mount that remains stationary on the wall. This next one up is tilt. So as you can see, it can tilt. So if you have your TV at the host site up a little higher, so you would want to tilt that forward so the patrons could more easily see that on a beeline view from where they're sitting. Next up would be a full motion mount. So as you can see, this can either sit up against a wall or pull out and cock left or cock right. This shows you an actual mounting of one of the brackets in our office. So as you can see, if you look a little lower left on this, you can see that this is the media wall version, and there's a 55-inch screen with another 32-inch screen bookending on the right side there. So these types of mounts are more convenient in that as you bookend the 55-inch, then these are more easily lined up and maneuvered so they have a cleaner look. So for example, if you look down on that lower right-hand side, you will see the other bookend of this 32-inch TV over there, and you can see how it's kind of cocked out a little bit to give it a little bit more of a winged version. This is a picture of a tilt and full motion. So it not only moves out and left and right, but it also tilts up and down. And last up would be the ceiling mounts. And these come in a variety of versions. This one's a single mount. It either bolts to the ceiling or bolts to a truss or bolts to an I-beam that's running across the business. And these ceiling mounts come in other versions, such as a double. So as you can see here, you have the mount coming down, but this holds two TVs, one on each side. And then this is a tri-mount, where in effect you have three TVs that are up there. And we've had as big as three 55-inch TVs on these tri-mounts. So in closing on the brackets, as I mentioned earlier, you can purchase these brackets anywhere. Monoprice has some very good prices. You can buy them at Costco, Walmart, or Sam's Club. What we've done more recently is we just let the installer decide. When we allow the installer to do it, it ends up being a little bit more expensive, but quite honestly, we really let it be up to the installer to select the proper mount that they feel should go there. And there's many, many different versions to choose from. Even though they make an extra $20 or $30 on this, it ends up being more convenient for us. So let's take this up big picture and summarize everything from a pricing aspect. The main component of the total cost factors are going to be the TV screens. And obviously we can't guarantee the pricing as this is market driven. But going through this exercise, it will give you a ballpark idea as to the equipment pricing. The beauty of our process is that you don't have to have any inventory. You order everything as you need it, kind of a ship-on-demand type situation. I have a spreadsheet that I use in my office, and again, I'm not trying to complicate it, but we have all the prices coming across, and they flow. And as the prices change, and that's what the yellow boxes are for, those are all the items that can change, then everything happens automatically and then flows through on our inventory sheets. So let's zero in on each of the models to get a better idea of what our cost structure is. If we look at the cost of the screens, the last time we purchased a 40-inch screen, it was $244. It cost us about $25 to get that shipped out, 3-day delivery, giving us a total of $269 for that screen. A single portrait would only need one media player, and that would be our standard media player, which runs $243, plus what we've estimated to be $5 in shipping for a total cost of $248. If we come over to the installation and labor side, typically labor is going to be somewhere between $50 and $100 to install one screen. You're going to have approximately $35 in a mount and wiring, although that mount may cost a little more depending on where you're going with that. And then if you involve an outside sales rep, so in other words, someone other than you has set up the host site for you, then I've added a $150 cost for sales rep commissions. In most cases, you're not going to have this. You're going to be setting up your own host sites. So as we come over to the totals, you can see that this is going to run somewhere between $630 and $780 to have a single portrait TV and media player and the labor for a full installation. Please note that labor can run more or less depending on where you live. The wiring can obviously run more or less because sometimes we run into a situation where electric lines need to be run to the place where the business owner, the host site, would like to have that TV. And running electric can be rather expensive. You want to be sure that you're using licensed and bonded people. Your host site's going to demand it, but more importantly, you're going to be glad you had it if there's anything that goes wrong that was caused by that installer. Next up's the media wall. So let's zero in on things there. Here with the screens, with the media wall, you can use any size, but typically that tends to be 50-inch, a 55, a 58, or a 60. In most of our recent cases, we've been using a 55-inch. Now that would be bookended by either two 32-inch or two 39-inch TVs. The last time we purchased 32-inch TVs, it ran about $205, although we've had that as low as $160. And the last time we purchased 39-inch TVs, that was $244, and the shipping is what it is. While we're on the subject of shipping, I just want to sidebar here for a moment. When you receive your TVs, you're going to want to open them up. Ideally, you're going to want to open them up, check for any cracked screens, and you're going to want to plug them in to make sure there's nothing internal that took place. The reason I say this is that you do not want to end up holding the bag for a cracked screen. So although it's inconvenient, it's easy to do. Just open up the box, plug it in, and check it out to make sure it's what it's supposed to be. If it's not, then call the place where you purchase it, get an RMA form sent so that can all be picked up and sent back. So in summary, if you're using a 32-inch TV, that's going to run about $450 because you're purchasing two of them. And if you're purchasing a 55-inch TV, that runs $543 all in. For the servers, for the most part, you're going to be using our standard servers. You'll need two of them, so that's going to run you about $496, just under $500 for the two servers. The labor and installation is going to run you a little bit more. Typically, we have found that to be closer to $200 to $250 because you're installing three TVs. You've got the wiring, you're going to have three mounts, so it might even run a little bit more than $100. And then if you have an outside salesperson, typically that's going to be running somewhere between $200 and $400 depending on the quality of that host site. So all in, you're going to be running somewhere between $1,700 and $2,500 to install a media wall. Next up is our landscape model, so let's zero in on that. Typically with a landscape, it's somewhere between a 50-inch and a 60-inch TV that's being used. I've priced out a 58-inch TV in that it is mid between a 55 and a 60-inch TV. Now, as a sidebar, I was in the store the other day and noticed that the pricing on the 65 inches have come down quite a bit. Almost another $200 from where they were. In other words, they're getting close to our pricing on our 60-inch TVs. So perhaps it won't be that long before we're going to be giving some consideration of putting some 65-inch TVs up there. You're going to be the best determining factor as to what's appropriate for that host site. And one last thought before we leave the landscape model. Please note that a number of our landscape installations use the host site's existing TV. And in those cases, the cost of the TV then is limited altogether. However, I want to caution you not to be cheap and attempt to use the host site screen all the time. Yes, I understand there's kind of an inclination to save money, but that cost of the TV is minor when considered as the whole picture. We have found in a number of cases that what kind of cemented the deal, or to have the host site make that decision a little bit easier, was to actually provide them a TV. We actually had one situation in Denver that I recall where we had a great signature host site who was considering putting up our screens, and it was the fact that we put up two 55-inch TVs rather than one that cemented the deal. For our landscape model, we only need one of our standard servers, so we're looking at $248. However, if the host site is inclined to be showing live TV over on that left zone, then we're going to need a different server, and that will basically take that cost up to about $530. The installation labor is down about $100 to $150. The wiring and mounting is on the lower side because we have just one TV. And depending on the host site, if you have an outside sales rep, you're not doing this yourself, I've plugged in $250 as reasonable compensation for that person. So in total, the typical landscape model is going to be running somewhere between $1,100 and $1,400, depending on all the cost factors. The next model up is our kiosk model. Quite frankly, I don't think too many of you are going to run into this, but let's review it just in case. If you recall, this is the larger TV, typically a 50 or 55-inch that return portrait, and we install it on a stand with wheels, so it can be wheeled in and out of the host site. As I mentioned, almost any size screen can be used. Obviously, you need to make sure that stand can handle it, but the one that we use can handle all the way up to a 70-inch screen. I've priced out a 55-inch screen. That tends to be our typical screen used. If the kiosk is going to be placed in a school, then you typically need a different server that either has Google or Windows on it, and that licensing costs more. If you're not going to have it in a school setting, then you can get away with our standard model, which is about a third of the cost. Installation and labor is going to run you more because of putting the stand together, and obviously you have the cost of the stand, which runs about $500. And then the wiring's up there because you're going to need electric cords that are going to be coming out from wherever the electric outlet is in the school or to outside where the kiosk is placed. So all in, you're going to be running somewhere between $2,200 and $2,400 for a kiosk. So that ends our module on the media player. Hopefully you found that informative.